Hi, folks. Welcome to Ownership Matters, Strategies for the Oncoming Business Succession Wave, which is part of the fourth annual Rising Economy Conference hosted by the South Island Prosperity Partnership. My name is Ian Duncan, and I'm the practice lead for social impact at Roy Group. Roy Group is a firm focused on developing the next generation of leaders by developing their executive teams as the next generation of mentors. We first came across South Island Prosperity Partnership through our work with Zita Cobb and the Shorefast team, and Carol Ann Hilton with her work on indigenomics. And what the South Island Prosperity Partnership is doing immediately resonated with us just because of the focus on community and connectedness. I'm going to quickly walk through the format for today. This format, about halfway through the conversation, we'll be taking your questions for speakers, and you can submit a question anytime through Zoom in the Q&A section that's just below the video here. It's being recorded, but you can submit your questions anonymously in case that's something you want to do. To interact with other attendees, you can use Zoom or the Whova chat, and the production team will be monitoring that Whova chat and the Q&A for anybody who's joining us through the app. And then finally, if you're posting takeaways on social media, we just ask that you use the hashtag Rising Economy 2024. Our moderator today is Bruce Williams, CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Hello, Bruce.
Hey, Ian, how are you?
Yeah, well, excited for the conversation you're about to host.
Me too.
Many of you will know Bruce as a public figure and broadcaster. In the community, he's known for his integrity, his altruism, and a unique ability to create successful partnerships and collaborations. But as the social impact guy at Roy Group, what really caught my attention was 2023 for Bruce, in which he was named Executive of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce Executives of Canada, and was recognized by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce when they awarded him and the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce a prestigious Inclusive Growth Award. Bruce has been the lead on the Chamber's advancement of inclusion and diversity and equity. He's a member of the Canadian Chamber DEI Committee and has also been central in the Chamber's enhanced engagement with Indigenous-owned business in the South Island. Speaking to my heart, Bruce, welcome.
Ian, thank you. And thanks to you and the Roy Group for your support for this event as well, and for the South Island Prosperity Partnership enabling this whole thing to make it happen. I've been on site the last couple of days at the live event, so if you're watching this recording later on, you will have heard lots and lots about what happened over the last few days. As I mentioned to the people at the live event too, the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce actually gave birth to the South Island Prosperity Partnership. It began as a committee of the Chamber. I was a member of that committee. I wasn't affiliated with the Chamber at the time, but I was a member of that committee. And then from that committee, 8 of us withdrew and became the initial board that created what is now the South Island Prosperity Partnership. I actually worked with the organization too as Director of Engagement for about a year and a half. And I was the interim CEO when CEO Emily de Rosenroll was off on a maternity leave. So SIP is something near and dear to my heart, and it's great to be involved in this way as well. So the session today, as you saw in the outlook and the description of this thing, something like 75% of SMEs, in other words, small, medium enterprise, are planning to retire in the next 10 years. So that brings up all kinds of questions about, will the company be worth what you think it's worth when you go to sell it? Will be family taking it over? What's the overall succession plan? Will you create a new business model that's different from the one within which your business operates now? So we have a bunch of people here to talk about that today who have all been involved in these amazing projects. And Ian, you mentioned that I was a broadcaster. Well, I'm a recovering broadcaster now, but one of our guests here today is a current broadcaster. It's my friend Rob Germain. Rob is the guy who is the CEO, the chief employee owner at CHEK Media Group. And again, you have access to Rob's bio, but there's some remarkable things that have happened in the CHEK building, which we're going to hear about, how they've turned their fortunes around, how they've become actually a historic model in broadcasting and in culture in general in Canada. So Rob, it's great to have you here. We're looking forward to hearing your story, and welcome.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Ian. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, also joining us today is Kristi Fairholm Mader. Kristi is someone that's probably known to a number of you around town. She's going to talk about things from sort of a nonprofit point of view as well. She's always worked in the social impact sector, and after 10 years as a youth worker, she returned to school to complete a business degree. So we're going to talk about social enterprise. Her organization is called Scale Collaborative, and Kristi, welcome to the event and to the program. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Also with us today is Eben Louw. Eben is a CPA, a chartered professional accountant, who has actually found the time to join us during tax season for this event today. So we're going to start talking about a number of things involving different business models. You may have general questions about what's going on within your business or your intentions or what you want to do. So Eben is going to be the guy who provides us with that professional guidance and suggestions and insight that we need to establish what our businesses will best look like. So Eben, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bruce.
And another really cool story today we're going to get from Wendy O'Connor, who is in Sooke. So you've probably heard about this. I know CHEK News did a story about this. Coffee shop in Sooke called Stick in the Mud was announced. The owner said, well, I'm going to close it. I'm not going to do this anymore. So Wendy and a number of people went, oh, wait a minute. This is our thing. This is where we meet. We love this place. We don't want to see this go away. So Wendy and some others got together and created a cooperative, and they bought the business and are operating it in that model right now. We're going to hear that story as well from Wendy. So Wendy, welcome to you.
Thank you.
I want to actually start with you, Wendy, because this is one that this is something that it's a business case, but it comes from the heart. I mean, you and some other people, if I have the number correct, 330 people have stepped up to make all of this happen. So walk me through that a little bit, beginning with the day that the gentleman said, okay, we're done. I'm going to close Stick in the Mud. Then what happened?
It was a total surprise to us. I mean, David had apparently had the place up for sale, but there was no big for sale sign, and none of us would have been able to afford to purchase a coffee shop anyway. So it wasn't really on our radar until the day that he said, that's it, it's closing on July 23rd. That was the 15th of April last year when he announced that. We, three of us, immediately jumped into action and decided to hold a public meeting at the library to see if there was any interest in saving it. And one of the three was a fervent believer in the power of cooperatives. So we thought, well, let's try that model. And enough people showed up at the library, and we decided, all right, let's figure out how to do this. So some research was done, reached out to Cooperative in Vancouver. We reached out to Marty Frost there, and they are they're a cooperative that promotes and supports the development of employee-owned businesses in BC. They firmly believe in the model of broad-based employee ownership, thinking that it leads to stronger and fairer economies, that preserves jobs in small communities, less likely to default on debts, and are more resilient in economic downturns. He gave us a lot of valuable information, but we didn't have the money to pay for his fees, for their fees. That was when the new economic development officer in the district of Sooke mentioned to us about Cooperatives First, which is a company based out of Saskatoon. And they're a nonprofit, organized. They're funded by the Federated Cooperatives Limited and the Cooperative Retailing System. They were founded in 2015, and their organization provides co-op startup resources, feasibility studies, business plans, online courses, and incorporation support to rural and Indigenous entrepreneurs across Western Canada. Kyle at Cooperatives First has been and continues to be an amazing resource to us every step along the way. Um, that was the start of it.
Hmm.
We were incorporated on the 19th of June, and we actually officially purchased the business on the 4th of September, and we reopened as Cafe Vizino on the 18th of September. So less than 90 days from incorporation to purchase. It was a wild ride.
I'm going to say you acted quickly, so you're no stick in the mud. That's for sure, even though you took over a stick in the mud. So hearing that sort of brief description of how this all happened, even I'm going to go to you as the guy who is sort of the business professional. Give me your take on that. What's your perspective on how they did that?
Well, I've got a question for Wendy. Wendy, it's good
Okay.
to meet you. In terms of the broad-based involvement in your community, what is the involvement in the community when it comes to things like financing and providing financing if it's not with the banks? And if the banks, for example, would need security, let's say you want to expand or replace equipment. And the other part is more around governance. How do you make decisions when it is something that is owned by such a large community of participants?
Okay, we have actually 333 members, and we're a multi-stakeholder cooperative. We have 116 investors, and we had 210 shares were sold so far. Membership requires a purchase of $31 shares, and investment shares are $500 a piece. And we are governed by, well, unintentionally. Originally, the steering party, we thought we would just hand it over once it was done, but we found to our chagrin that the steering party is supposed to become the first board of directors. So we have a board of directors, and we sit once a month, sometimes more often, especially in this first year, and hash things through and have to come to consensus on decisions. And we have the welfare of our employees, number one. The weight of responsibility to our investors is also there as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. So there's 116 people that put money in, right?
Yes.
Okay. At various levels?
Yes, basically. But Sooke does things the hard way. You know, we had hoped for some angel investors, and $500 at a time, it came in.
Wow. So Gail Scott is the woman who's the economic development officer at Sooke. She, of course, would come forward because she doesn't want to lose a business. That's not what growth is all about. So yeah. Okay, we'll come back to that. Rob Germain, what happened at CHEK was something that was interesting because you were in full view of the entire public. I worked at the other TV station at the time, and we made a big deal about what was going down. We kept saying the lights are going to go out. CHEK's going to go out of business. They're going to disappear. Our competition is gone. But all that attention that was placed on you guys actually ended up having a pretty positive result. So let's recap. You were told that the station was to close by the owner at the time, which was CanWest Global. Take it from there.
Well, it was actually, we were told that it would be for sale, and if it didn't sell, that it would close. So that announcement came in 2009 in February, and they said if it hadn't sold by August 31st, 2009, then it would close. And when they first announced it, we were actually quite happy because we had been enduring just cutback after cutback under CanWest's ownership. And we thought, great, finally somebody, there's an opportunity for somebody, to come in and hopefully they'll run it better and it'll be a good thing. Month after month went by. We were told that there were, people kicking the tires, but no takers. And so we started to, create our own business plan because we thought that, there was opportunity to make it viable, even though the former owners didn't see it that way. So we were putting together a business plan. Actually, there was quite a bit of publicity about the station closing. The station had been serving the community since 1956. So a lot of loyal viewers that were concerned that it was going to go away. And that gave us a lot of, I guess, encouragement to try to do everything we can to keep it going. I mean, we also, knew that it was important to the community, and of course, our jobs were at stake. came down to July 22nd, and still no buyers. We had been with this business plan. We'd gone and talked to some potential investors and investor groups, but hadn't had any real hard interest at that point. Then a vice president came to town and announced that gave us all our layoff notices, our official layoff notices. And we said, well, thank you very much, but we've got other plans. And so we really sort of, at that point, it was, obviously backs were up against the wall. And we got really heavily involved talking to the potential investors, one of whom was a car dealer from Nanaimo who was aware of the Harmac model, where the Harmac pulp mill in Nanaimo a year prior the mill had been shut down. The parent company had gone bankrupt, and it was in the hands of a receiver, and the employees, unionized employees, put in a bid to buy the mill. And they got it, and so we had actually covered that as a news organization from the day it was closed to the day they reopened it. It was a great success story. So we were familiar with that model. And then one of the investors that we were showing our business plan to said, if you guys were willing to put in your own money, I'd be willing to take a look at this. So we had a meeting as a group, and we met with our union, and we just started to really push on the employee ownership side of things. And in fact, I contacted the president of Harmac to find out exactly how they structured the deal, and could they help us, give us some tips, and maybe put us in touch with their lawyer who facilitated the deal. That was Levi Sampson, and he ended up coming on board as one of our investors, and actually is our chair of our company now. So even then, the company didn't want to sell. By that point, they had committed to the bondholders that were in control of the company at the time that CHEK was closing. We gave them letters of intent. We raised $2.5 million to operate the company once we took it over. It was for sale, supposedly for $1. And it came right down to the very last minute. In fact, we submitted a binding offer 3 days before the station was to close, and it was rejected. And at that point, we went to the premier, to the opposition leader, to the federal cabinet minister, MP, who was a cabinet minister in the federal government, and got them all on camera that night talking about that CanWest should do the right thing and should let the employees have a go. It came down to literally the last day we were supposed to close. We decided we were going to hold our last newscast potentially in our parking lot, and invited people down to come watch the newscast and celebrate at that time 53 years in broadcasting. And that day, CanWest blinked, and they contacted us and said they'd be willing to give us 24 hours. Further, we were supposed to go off the air that midnight. I had to phone around all the cable companies and say, don't take us off the air, because we're going to stay on. And we announced in our newscast that night to the crowd of several hundred people in our parking lot that we were staying on the air at least for another day. And so a big cheer went up. And then about 4 days later, we eventually had an agreement in principle and took over the company. So that was 15 years ago. It was tough going at the beginning, especially. We had no programming, we had no advertising.
Yeah.
All that had been taken off the channel, but we've been bucking the trend. We've been seeing so many layoffs in the media. We've actually doubled we were 35 employees at the time. Now we're more than 80. And we've been, bucking the trend, and hopefully we can continue to do so.
Yeah. Are all your employees still owners?
Yeah, everybody who is full-time has to have an investment in CHEK. Yeah.
Okay. So Eben, we were talking earlier about the actual definition of an employee-owned company. There are some that have employee ownership within their ownership, but this one is pretty much entirely employee-owned. So kind of walk us through that a little bit, if you would.
Is that a Rob question or an Eben question?
Well, there's two ways to look at that, right? To be outrightly employee-owned, or I guess partially employee-owned.
Maybe I can tell you our model, and then Eben can expand on that. So yeah, the employees all have to have money in the company, have to have shares in the company, but we also have investors that have purchased shares. There is no individual investor that's a controlling investor. In fact, the employees through their shares and through our articles of incorporation control the company. So the employees actually control 4 out of the 7 seats on our board of directors. And 3 of the board have to be employee owners. There's a 4th director who's independent that only the employees vote for. So that way we ensure that there's we control the company as well. And then the union also has shares in the company. And our union president is also on one of the directors of the company. And then we have some investor directors as well.
Okay, so Eben, over to you.
So most of our mandates, the mandates that I would work on, and it's across industries across the country, would be one of the, or 2 of the main objections that large corporate shareholders have about bringing employees in is, one is, I do not want to have a whole bunch of people involved in every single decision that I make. And the other part is confidentiality. They want to maintain confidentiality about compensation of senior individuals, about, growth plans, investments, the compensation of the majority shareholder. So Rob, how do you bridge that? Because your company may have started off with, how do we preserve the employment of everybody? There is a social impact for sure, but you also have investors, and it's a careful balance there. So how do you deal with those issues around confidentiality and around the governance part, the decision making, and how many cooks there are in the kitchen?
We haven't had really too much trouble with that, I have to say. I mean, we are a fairly open book, our employees know what our figures are, which is a good thing, right? So, when there was at one point where we were actually, had a serious setback, and the employees top on down took a pay cut rather than seeing people lay off, or so you tend to get buy-in because people know what the real goods are. There's a lot of trust because everybody knows what's real and what's not. So our union relationship is vastly different than it was when it was part of CanWest, and there was a lot of there wasn't a lot of sharing that kind of information. So that led to distrust and more of an adversarial kind of a thing. But no, actually, I think the decision making, the fact that it can be made locally, with the best interests of the unit, and our shareholders, frankly, aren't looking for the highest rate of return on their investment. That they knew when they were investing, what they were really looking for was for the employees to keep their jobs and for the business to continue to serve the public, and that was what they were really looking for. They truly were angel investors. We have had, especially for the last 5 years or 6 years, good returns and been able to pay dividends. So our investors have been benefiting from that. At the same time, though, they've allowed us to invest in the company, invest in hiring, in new technology, and also in paying down. We purchased the building in 2011, and we've been working very hard to pay off our mortgage as well, so we're debt free.
And the company keeps evolving. There's been technical advancements. You'll see some of that in Rob's bio as well. Kristi Fairholm Mater, you've had quite a journey. Yours has been a fascinating journey to bring you to where you are now, the things you've done in various parts of the world. So first of all, just give us a quick description of Scale Collaborative, where you've landed now. Tell me about that.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So Scale Collaborative is located in Victoria on the Algonquin-speaking territories of the Songhees Esquimalt Nations. And we are focused on building capacity of the nonprofit and charitable sector. and the capacity that we focus on is, helping organizations build strong financial models underneath them, help them to be able to grow and become more enterprising in order to scale their impact. So that's the core of the work that we do at Scale Collaborative. We also operate the Dock Center for Social Impact, which has a number of social impact organizations that work out of it. And we also operate an impact investment fund to provide capital and flexible and patient capital to great projects that are taking place in the region and across Vancouver Island. And then some of our community wealth building work is in our charitable nonprofit. So we really try to look at how do we build a strong social economy here on Vancouver Island and beyond.
Thank you for your territorial acknowledgement, which I forgot to do at the beginning, and I always intend to do that. So I just did want to recognize and acknowledge that I live and work in the ancestral lands of the Lekwungen-speaking nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. So Kristi, you use these very empowering terms, some really cool stuff like social enterprise and community wealth, and community ownership. So tell me a little bit more about that and what that all means.
Yeah, so I don't think anyone would be surprised when we look at our nonprofit and charitable sector that it's pretty vastly under-resourced and that it really hits above its weight. So the things that organizations do in our community to provide services and arts and culture and all the things that the nonprofit sector does is often done on shoestring budgets. And so what we've seen is a real trend is organizations looking to diversify their revenue, and not only to look at how they generate additional revenues through that revenue diversification, but also how they can connect scaling and growing their impact through revenue generation. And so this is where we got really interested in acquisitions and growing social enterprises. And the way that nonprofits and charities had been developing and growing social enterprises is often through startup, right? So they would think, oh, I want to create an enterprise that employs the people that we're serving. I want to create a cafe that can employ people who may face barriers to employment. So they start a cafe or they start a delivery service, or they start, you could see them kind of doing it like this. But we began to notice the same thing that you're talking about, Bruce, is that there's this huge wave of succession upon us around enterprises, already existing businesses, bread and butter, Main Street businesses that are beginning to come up for sale. And so we thought, well, instead of nonprofits going through a startup journey, which is really hard, why don't we explore what it would look like if they began to acquire existing businesses, holding those businesses in community and beginning to transition them into being social enterprises. So we started an initiative to really look into that.
Something we've done an op-ed through the chamber that pointed out very early on in the pandemic that when times are tough, when things are uncertain, very often the things that disappear are marketing or advertising, which relates to organizations like Rob's, and philanthropy and charitable giving at a time when those services are needed more than ever when times are tough. Arts and culture, for example, that's something that very often that funding will disappear because government feels that money should go elsewhere. But tell me about the conversations that have kept this moving forward, and also the concept of like the chamber is a nonprofit, but it doesn't mean we don't generate revenue, and it doesn't mean that we operate above and beyond the budgets that we have. But what a nonprofit does with their profits is different than what a for-profit does. So talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, we use the word nonprofit because that is the legal name of these organizations.
Yeah.
But I really like not for profit, and so that means nonprofit organizations absolutely can generate surpluses and profits. They can't be profit seeking and they can't return their profits into investors. But what they can do is they can generate surpluses and profits. And when we ask and look at nonprofits that they are able to generate additional revenues, what do? They put it right back into community, right back into programs and services, right back into staff. And so those profits go back to build, I'm going to say to build wealth in our community and to deepen and broaden the services that they provide. So we really try to take an abundance view to nonprofits and say, it's not that you can't do this, it's like you can do that. And those profits that you have can generate and go back into community. When they own an enterprise, they often do that in a separate entity. So the nonprofit a charity can own a separate entity. It will operate separately, but then it can make donation or can make a dividend payment, depending on how it's structured and how their accountant advises, back to support the parent organization.
And that wealth, if you will, generates a whole different outcome with a nonprofit than it does with a for-profit.
It does. Yeah.
Eben, what have you seen in the nonprofit sector in the last while in your dealings at MNP? Because it's been a struggle as philanthropy has disappeared a little bit, demand has gone up. Tell me what you've seen in that whole sector in the last while.
Well, Bruce, I think there is a evolving gray world of companies that, as we prepared for this call, I said it used to be somebody runs a company, build it up, let's make it valuable. I retire, and the word Mexico and Palm Springs, those words come up, and it used to be that complete out. And I think it has shifted quite a bit with people staying in. There has been a large problem dealing with retention, though. And that is where we get the emergency calls quite often to say, I'm on the cusp of losing some key people. And so they want top dollar in order to stay in the communities. And it's a long-winded way to say that we're finding that more and more people are saying, how do I keep those top paying jobs inside the community? What I called laundry on the washing line, right? So that the people, the young families are staying and they're not pulled into the large geographic areas where they can get top dollars for their skills. But part of that is exactly, without necessarily calling it non-for-profit or non-profit, it is to have that social impact locally and to say, how do we do it? And I am sensing, because I work mostly with private companies, a shift there of it doesn't have to be all profits come to me as the majority shareholder. I've actually heard in the last 3 years, shareholders say, I've got enough. I don't want more, which if you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, nobody will say that. I've heard it so many times. I've got enough. I don't need much more. How do I help the young people to take this over? And I mean, hats off to Kristi and her organization and what they do. I think there is such a need for it, and the communities will just win from doing that.
Yeah. I want to stick with you just a second too. There's an organization in town here called the Family Business Association, which is now merged with the Chamber of Commerce. So we have a family business community, and they deal with the unique opportunities and challenges of a family business. And I'll back that up by saying, when I was a kid, I lived in a family-owned business. We owned a bakery. We owned and operated a bakery. And just for the record, 4 kids in my family, none of us are bakers, just saying. But when you take a look at the business model that's family-owned, how does that differ from one that's another model, multiple ownership or something, or a single ownership? Because it could be, as we've heard from different people, I want to keep my family involved, but they're not very capable. In fact, a couple of them are morons. What am I supposed to do about that? How do you deal with that?
Well, the 2 parts to it. One is acknowledge the fact that preparation of the next generation starts way earlier than you think. If you're saying, I have to do it now, it's most likely too late. I've joked with quite a few companies where I said, you remember when you went on a road trip with your kids when they were little and they all sat on the back seat and you hear, Mom, Dad, they're touching me, he's over my line, all of that. I said, the fact that they're 50 something doesn't make a difference. People still do it when they're siblings and they're in a family business. And I respect what happens in family businesses. It's a lot of the work that I do. The conflict resolution, there's a lot of stuff that comes out. I think one of the biggest problems is a lack of communication, like in all relationships likely, is to say, do you truly want to do this? And to deal upfront, way ahead of the decision-making points with questions such as, is my child capable, and is a third party able to help assess the capability of my child to lead a company? Just because you won the gene pool lottery, you've got the right last name, doesn't mean you can take over from your dad or your mom, who are the founders of a company and who put the sweat equity in. This is where I asked Wendy a question on governance, my first question. This is where the governance piece comes in, and you ask yourself, is it business first or is it family first? And what is the right decision-making structures? For example, a family council, an advisory board to help with that, because that is how you keep the lines clear, even though it may be a small family business.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of situations too where someone marries into a family, and that's kind of the salvation, that they bring the skills that are needed to do that. Within our family business committee at the Chamber, we have something called FBATs, Family Business Advisory Teams, where they work with each other and other similar organizations and other individuals to kind of solve some of those problems. So those of you that are taking part in this session right now, if you have any questions or comments for our guests, please do that in the Q&A or in the chat room. We'll get getting to those in just a second. So in a sense, Kristi and Rob and Wendy, you're not family-owned businesses, but you're creating a family atmosphere. Wendy, you've got a family of 333. Tell me about that dynamic and how it works.
That was the whole reason for this.
Yeah.
You know, it was when we were exploring the possibilities and trying to gather the financing. It was the 87-year-old who showed up at one of our steering committee's doors the night before we presented our agreement to purchase offer. And you know, he showed up with $2,000 saying, I have to do what I can to try and keep this gem in our community. It was the single mom who sent an email saying, I'm in for $500. I haven't been in Sooke long, but for me, the priority was the three things I needed was a community with a good swimming pool, with a good library, and a good coffee shop. You know, it is overhearing a couple of people at the grocery store talking about the new Cafe Vizino, and the one person saying, oh, isn't that the coffee shop the people bought? You know, it's the young barista on the opening day. I overheard her excitedly talking to, you know, someone beside her saying, I never dreamed I could ever be a part owner in a coffee shop. You know, it's that, it's not profit at any cost. I think that's what's important.
How was your employee retention with the switch?
We currently employ 13 employees. I believe that's roughly what it was before. And we lost 4, 2 retired completely.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think we've done really well. You know, our employees, it's hard to keep them from singing. And that's kind of nice to have that.
Yeah, and I've been to Cafe Vizino, and I think it's pretty cool, actually. What's the name mean, by the way?
It's a nod to David's A Stick in the Mud, and it dates back to when all of Sooke had one postal code, VOS 1NO.
Oh, really? Yeah, the stories behind names. Hey, isn't that something? Kristi, I want to talk about that family element within the whole group of organizations that you've been involved with over time. But you know, you've got collaborative right in your title. That's the spirit of how you operate, right? That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, we always work in community. We always work with organizations. And I'm going to say, like, I think, you know, when we're working with organizations that are trying to deal and address with complex challenges in community, they do need to collaborate. And so the exciting part about when they acquire a business, and we saw this, you know, I'll give an example, like, you know, the Port Alberni Community Futures, they acquired a long-standing family-owned business, and it had a, you know, a number of employees that was kind of separate. The owner left, and all of a sudden these employees came into this large network of the nonprofit and began to feel part of the purpose of that organization, which is to increase economic development in the Port Alberni region. So it allows, like, when an entity or a private enterprise transitions to a nonprofit, it infuses purpose in. You know, it can often, you know, if it's a sole proprietor or a small business, it brings some professionalization to that business, because the nonprofit often has like systems and structures and tends to be, you know, a steady organization. So you see sort of like that care and protection around employees. You often see, you know, the wages go up for employees, the vacations get bigger. Like, there's a whole bunch of benefits that can often happen as well, that I think sort of extends that kind of family, as you're talking about, Bruce, that family feel, and also that real, like, grounding into purpose and the difference that enterprise is now making in community.
Yeah, makes for good HR too. Rob, I have kind of a connection to CHEK because I do a podcast every week that airs on CHEK TV. It's called Chamber Chats. You should check it out. It's available online and over air as well. But I sense that when I'm in your building that there is that sense of family and community in a business where it's known to have colossal and staggering egos involved in media, especially in television. You don't get that feel from your group. You really don't, because you've kind of come past that and you realize by working together, you are that family.
It does kind of feel that way, yeah. You know, people think, you know, feel that they have a say, and they do, right? We have a, you know, as well as our employee ownership controlling the board, we also have a joint union management committee that we meet once a month to kind of set policy and deal with things, you know, pet policies, whatever, that kind of, little things and big things, right? And we've just brought in a matching pension plan. We weren't able to do that when we became independent, but we've been able to do that now. So, yeah, we're always having, events and we have a, social committee, as most businesses do, but yeah, it does feel very much like family, and people also feel responsibility, though. It's not just all, getting the benefits of it, but there's also responsibility that comes with that, right? The onus is on them to, also come up with some solutions, and for that matter, when they leave a room, they turn off the lights, right? So it's, because they're owners.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic to see. Question that came in the Q&A. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but I will do it anyway. Wanted to ask Kristi to speak to the importance of local control in our local place economies, and how succession presents a risk and loss of control if our local businesses close due to a retiring owner or get bought by faraway capital like a private equity portfolio. Is this a real risk, and what can we do?
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. Yeah, I think that it is a risk. I think there's tons and tons of research that's out there that shows how local ownership provides, like, the circular aspect of more dollars being invested into community, more dollars being, taking care of employees in a different way, donations into the sector. Like, there's lots and lots of benefits that local ownership provides. And so when we have a lot of local businesses coming up for sale, and you begin to see external investors wanting to acquire those businesses, the emphasis changes, the purpose begins to change. And so the purpose begins to want to provide returns on investment, or to provide, money tends to leave our community when ownership is not located in communities. So I think that connection between local control, local ownership, and the benefits that come from local ownership and control is really significant. Like, who owns really matters. And so I think the more that we can do the things like Wendy's done, that Rob's done, that we're trying to do at that scale, the more that we can make these not one-offs, but make it really easy that when a business comes up for succession, that nonprofits, cooperative, employee ownership become real options for owners to think about in order to keep those benefits in community, I think is something we want to pay attention to and try to do more of. I think we need more of all this good stuff.
Oh, I mean, that community wealth and social enterprise and all that stuff, it creates a quality of life for everybody. That's an intentional outcome of that. Eben, in the traditional plan of owning a business for a while and then deciding to sell it, what happens if you base your life on the fact that you're going to sell your business for X number of dollars and nobody will pay you that amount? How often does that happen?
It happens more and more. There has been a real suppression on some of the possible sales values and the interest of private equity, just because interest rates, especially on the leverage deals, just because the interest rates are so high and the required rate of return has become so high. So one of the things that we've done is, and this is, I feel like I'm the only one that's not talking co-ops on this whole call today, is to involve more people in, even if it is small degrees of ownership. This can go into the whole company. It can go to the executive team or down to mid-level management, depending on the company. But they are becoming part of the buyout for the exiting shareholder. And there is a balance to be found. It is not necessarily the highest price. If I have to go across the mandates we've got on the go right now with profit sharing, equity sharing for private companies, I would say that 9 out of 10 situations, the majority shareholder would say, I know I will get far more for the company if I sell it to a third party, yet I decide not to do it. So even without a co-op type ownership model, there is a huge benefit that is being that's being transferred to those who are coming into ownership. And that is, yeah, I have a favorite line that I use and say, wouldn't it be nice to be a shareholder and to go, Rob, this is what happens in your group. You go to work every single day knowing you're working for the entity that is part of your retirement plan down the road. There's a quality of life that you get from doing that, yeah, is not easily found. You know, some people are driven by money only, but I believe in the good of mankind, and I I think that most people, I've seen it resonate with them to say, thank you for allowing me to participate in ownership, even at a small level. This is great. We know you didn't have to do it. This is something nice that I can tell my family as well.
Yeah, and as the question from, it was from Dallas at SIP, by the way, if it is somebody from away that's coming in to buy a business, if it's not somebody local, that introduces a whole different dynamic in how it's going to look, right?
It does, but they are not all the external capital is not evil. A lot of them are saying, we don't have the expertise to run and to manage it. How do we work with you to do that locally? And so that the equity, the value generation does stay, in a lot of cases, does stay local and with a local group of people. And I've worked with a few mandates where the private equity groups or the external equity said, we do not want to run this. We need you to do this, right? And there has been exit opportunities for everybody along the way, again, spreading value and spreading wealth to a much, much broader base.
So all three of you have transitioned your organization, your operation to where it is now. Rob, Germain, what's next? What are the next things as a part of this both succession plan and the growth of the company? Where do you need to go and where do you want to go?
Oh, we've got lots of challenges with the changing media landscape, changing technology, changing viewer habits and customer habits. So we're trying to stay ahead of that curve, with investing in new technology, getting into podcasting and streaming and things like that. So, I mean, we're trying, and we have, the motivation to do that, and everybody is behind that. A lot of organizations, I think, fear change, and you get a lot of resistance to change. Everybody knows that we have to change, and we have to, we're a sunset industry. So in that way, it's good. We get a lot of buy-in from that, and it's actually an exciting time. There's opportunities to be had as well. I mean, so it's kind of exciting.
Well, the technology that's almost running interruption in your world, though, is something that you guys have been able to take advantage of, though, right? Because you have that whole separate the CHEK Plus platform and the podcast you mentioned and all that sort of thing. Is AI going to be a support for you or a problem for you?
Yeah, no, I see it as a tool that we need to use. And, just like any other tool that we have, there are risks with it. And especially, when it comes to journalism, you don't want to let AI, write your story with, and produce a story that without, having full control over how a story is edited and produced and delivered. And I think we'll be really cautious in that way. And in fact, I see a greater need for trusted journalism, independent, trusted sources like CHEK, in a world where AI is going to be generating a lot of misinformation and disinformation and just spreading a lot of that falsehoods. And so you're going to need to have trusted sources and fact checking from an organization like CHEK. So I think that's something that's really important. It's going to be a key part of our, it's already what we do, but I think it's going to become more important in the future.
Yeah, the creation of AI generated video is going to be very disruptive, especially in political things.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, what's in the future for Vizino? What are the next steps? You've been through the process. You're settling in. The coffee's on. What's coming up next?
Well, it's definitely early days, but we want to continue to preserve the atmosphere of community. We have just started showing local artists' work. We have a lot of authors in Sooke. We would like to start hosting readings by some of these authors. We work in conjunction with some of the other local businesses. We buy donuts from a local woman doing that, starting to share bread made by a local baker. So we need to continue working on our vision, but also when we're looking at names, I mean, we're working with cooperatives first on this, and the name Sooke Community Investment Cooperative came up. So that leaves us, we have ideas that we'd like to toss around for other ventures, other things that the community needs, resources that are lacking. That would be wonderful to go that way as well.
How can people help you?
come out to our AGM, become a member, get your $30 membership for a lifetime, and come visit our little coffee shop at the back of a back alley across from the Legion.
Yeah. Um, when's the AGM, and what's the website that people can go to?
They can go to Sooke Community Investment Cooperative, SCIC.ca. There's also cafevizino.ca. Our AGM is going to be on the 29th of April at the Sooke Community Hall in the evening. Yeah, exciting times.
Yeah. Kristi, what about the future of the resources to keep Scale Collaborative up? What's that look like, the future?
Yeah, so in terms of this project, I mean, we want to see more community ownership, and transitions take place. So, we have a toolkit on how to do this on our Scale Institute website. We have a course that we're about to launch, which is on social enterprise acquisitions. We have a webinar that's coming up on how do we build an enabling policy environment for community ownership. And we have a 2-day convening coming up in partnership with Royal Roads in early May to talk about how do we create an enabling environment, but also how do we do more of these kinds of initiatives and projects and acquisitions and transitions here in Greater Victoria and the region.
Great. And the website to best find out more about what you do.
Yeah, for our community wealth building work, it's scaleinstitute.ca. And then for our financing work, it's thriveimpactfund.ca.
Great, thank you. So even as people are doing what they do to prepare for transition or for succession or whatever it might be, is it ever too early to start speaking with a professional like you about this?
No, it's never too early. Typically, we've had many phone calls over the years to say, I've got somebody that's going to leave. I've promised profit sharing or ownership sharing for 10 years. Can you get this turned around in 2 weeks? The short answer is no, we cannot. But, this is the time to start the conversation. So it's never too early. There are a lot of layers to work through. Part of our process is to do interviews. And Rob?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to continue on. I just wanted to ask a question, a follow-up question.
Okay.
So part of what we do is the interviews, and that's where we really go into the motivations of everyone involved. And that immediately opens up a whole slew of options that previously people thought, I'm in, I'm out. And now all of a sudden it broadens the options that we have available.
Yeah, Rob, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Eben about the employee ownership trust that has been proposed by, I understand, introduced legislation by the federal government, which would provide tax incentives for owners to sell to employees, but it would mean that employees wouldn't necessarily have to come up with the money themselves. That the trust would buy on their behalf the business, and the loan would come from the business, and they get paid back over time. And I just wonder if you can tell us any more about that, because I think it sounds like a great model. It could open up the employee ownership for a lot more people that don't maybe have the funds themselves, or don't have angel investors to help them purchase a business.
Rob, it's quite a common question. Thank you. It is too early to fully understand the benefits of it. The legislation is in the early phases. The use case for broad-based employee ownership would be more common with the legislation as it stands, as somebody that says, I want to bring some employees into ownership and not sell all of the company, right, or the majority of the company. And there it's binary. You go this way, yes, that way, no, whether it applies. But it is early days, and I'd be happy if anybody's got questions to look into it. There is a lot of information and blogging about it out there. But once you dig into it, you can right early on, you can answer some of the would this apply to you or not questions.
You're all very inspiring. Thank you for being with us here today, and thanks for everything you brought forward. We appreciate hearing your perspective on these things. We wish you all continued success, and thank you for being that inspiration. Wendy O'Connor is with Vizino in Sooke. Go, have coffee, talk to the locals. Rob Germain is the CEO, Chief Employee Owner at CHEK Television, and Kristi Fairholm Mater is with Scale Collaborative. Eben Louw is with MNP. And there's Ben Wag at SIP. Back to you.
Great, thank you. So I just want to say thanks to the speaker and moderator for participating today. We'd also like to thank our session sponsor, Roy Group, presenting sponsor RBC, and Catalyst sponsor Van City for supporting Rising Economy 2024 in partnership with Pacifican. We encourage you to head back to the Whova platform to continue the conversation. There, you can check out the event agenda and upcoming sessions, head to the community section to check out the exhibitor booths, join virtual meetups, and engage in discussions. The more you engage with the platform, the more points you earn, increasing your chances of winning one of our prizes, which includes small business gift certificates and books by our keynote speakers. Make sure you check your score on the app's leaderboard throughout the event. Coming up next, we have Lessons from Climate Leaders, a David versus Goliath panel. Thank you and goodbye.